Okay, here's a tutorial on how to make a 3D scene look realistic. The idea is simple, but this means actually doing a little bit more work and paying attention to real construction detail. I'm going to give you an idea of what I'm talking about. So first I build an area as if I was actually there. Now this is a typical 80 inches tall wall. Now if you notice, in real life the door doesn't sit on the floor like this. It's not true. It's up usually from the floor. But when we move this up, it cuts an opening onto the wall itself. And we don't need that. We need the door to sit down with the frame onto the floor. We're also going to have a piece like this, for example, between the doors, a threshold. Now, if you want to open and close the door, it's not going to work. So some things are wrong here. And since we're talking about doing realistic renderings, we have to draw things realistically. If I move this up and I try to fake it, there's still no gap, no opening underneath here. You see, when I move it up, it doesn't work. So, what we're going to do is we're going to have to detach this. First, let me take the frame off the door. It's still a door, still works, and it hinges too. But it doesn't have a frame. So, what I'm going to do with the wall is I'm going to convert this into an editable poly. Now, the door is independent of the wall, right? And now I can place the door where I need it. So, let me prepare my wall so I have quads everywhere. I don't want this opening to cause problems later. I'm going to correct this first. All right. Now let's look at this from the front view here. And we're going to make space for the door. This is a drywall. There's usually like 2 inches space around the door. What we call it rough opening. All right, so the door should be fitting somewhere inside that area. Now I can move the door up a little bit from the floor, but when I do that, I move my height up. So it's much better just to cut the door a little bit smaller by a few inches, like a couple of inches shorter. And now it should be at the right height. Okay? In real life, if you're going to have something under the door like this, you're going to have to cut the door too. All right? So now we need a frame on this door. If you look at the details that I found on the internet, something like this, you'll see how it's constructed. The casing around the drywall. Okay, and there's a door stop over here. So we can draw this and make our own casing. So you can imagine in this opening, we're going to have a piece of trim outside called the casing. And also we're going to have a piece of wood inside, which is the actual frame of the door right here. So I'm going to draw a line for both the casing and the frame. So I am just guessing for now. I'm going to have to cover this area with the casing. Then I'm going to continue drawing part of the frame. So I need to come over here. And at this point, I need to put a door stop. may as well draw that too. And the rest on the other side is, of course, just a symmetrical piece of the other side here. Okay, and now we need to draw a line around the opening, and we're going to sweep the line, add a sweep, and select the shape we made, the profile we made. So there we have our frame. All right, so now we just have to make final adjustments for the size of the door that should fit correctly. The drywall and all the door and everything is actually supposed to be up a little bit from the ground, because inside the drywall, what we have, let me show you in this image here, we have framing, all these studs which are wrapped with the drywall, and the studs are a little bit larger because there has to be some room for flooring at the bottom and for the ceiling on the top. So the drywall actually fits a little bit in between. Now, this is, of course, American standards. All right, so here's your subfloor, or this concrete, and then you have your floor here. And on the other side of the room, you have another type of floor. It could be hardwood floor or carpets. And then between the two floors, you need to join with a piece. In this case, because of the tile, it has to be a threshold made out of stone. That has to be cut to fit just like that. And then you add, of course, the baseboard and the quarter round to cover all the holes at the bottom. Now, in other countries, they don't use this. In the United States, this is the standard. And so that it should look something like this. And now if you look at this again, it looks real, or it has a realistic look because of that type of detail. Because the door and the spacing and underneath and around everything seems to be right. Now, the other part of the realistic rendering is the lighting we use and the materials we use. So here's the Vray basic setup that you can copy and make a template if you want for future use. Copy these parameters. You know, these are not really the best parameters to use, but at the same time, they are a good base to start with. I'm using progressive anti-alias. You can use adaptive. Adaptive is just a little faster. The time here to render does not help with it quality. It's just to see how long it takes to render to the last pixel. All right, the other numbers here that you can review are just default. So I'm trying to teach this with the least amount of confusion, let's say. Enable your global illumination, use irradiance map and light cache. If you click over here on advanced, you have here the ambient occlusion. You can turn this on later at the end. This number of the subdivisions is important. It will help you with a high detailed image. And of course, these numbers for light cache don't have to be changed. In the Render Elements tab, you can add some V-Ray elements like the lighting, the shadows, reflection, and especially the sample rate. Click OK and accept, and then later click on Enable at the bottom. This I will explain in detail on the next tutorial when I do materials. The other part of this is the mistake we make in rushing into things. As soon as we have our own model ready, if you're like me, you just can't wait to see it lit up, you know, or rendered. So we immediately add a light, any light. Let me try this. any V-Ray. I turn it on and I go like, that's too bright. Nah, I think I'm going to have to change the value of this. Maybe a little less light. And then I render again and I go like, that looks a little better. And I keep on and on for hours. And that's just not the way to work on realistic rendering. So let's forget about this now and we'll get started with doing the right way. So, you start with your subfloor. You add your walls, which are 5 inches thick, 8 feet tall. You add your windows, your door openings. You can have your custom walls. And then, for example, this wall here, I'm going to have a mirror box over here, and the switch and the plug. Of course, we're going to have a floor in the front, floor in the back, and we have a threshold in between. Another thing we need is some areas outside the building, usually landscaping or sidewalks or patios, because the light needs to be reflecting from these areas into the rooms through the windows and doors. We also need a camera to see this. We're going to use a physical camera. You place it at the eye level. And these are the basic settings for the physical camera. You can save these settings that work with the lighting we're working on. Now let's try to render. And obviously we need some light. The most realistic light to use now is, of course, the sun's light. So place a sunlight in your image and accept the environment map. You can move the sun to the proper hour and direction based on your location. The sunlight will come through the window at an angle, and it's going to light up the room. So this is the basic image of natural light coming in based on the camera settings. The overall lighting seems to be adequate. If we move the sunlight over here, say during the winter in another direction, we obviously are going to get more light. To see if you have too much or too little light, you can click on it on this icon on the left here. If the color is going into the red, that means there's way too much light here. And so we need to correct that. Add the doors and windows first. The glass, the frames, doors and windows interfere with the light, so now we need to adjust this again. Press 8 on your keyboard and open your Environment and Effects tab, and make sure you're using the default V-Ray Sky map. This will add a little bit of bluish tint into the image. This will help you also find some errors. We usually call this light leaks. That means there's an opening somewhere here. So let's go. It looks like it's around the back of this area, between the wall and the floor in this corner. If you look closely here, there's a gap over here, and that's where the light is coming in. So we need to close this area. That should do it. Another way of solving this problem is to open the door a little bit. And when you render, you would have a lot more light. Now, our eyes can adjust to the changes of light immediately, but the camera does not. Let me move this sun again, maybe a little bit late in the day, and maybe over here not so straight, coming this way. Now the light's coming through in the room a lot stronger this time. If you click this icon, you can see this is almost red. So that means it's overburned and it's too bright. The rest of the room looks good. So we have to try to find this, a solution to this problem where the two areas in one room are not working. So let's see if we can work with the camera settings. If we open the lens, we'll have more light coming in. That will solve the problem probably on the top of the image. That looks way too bright at the bottom here. See, it's already red, while the top seems to be okay. So what if I don't look at the floor area? What if I move my eyes towards the ceiling a little bit? That's another way of, correcting that. Okay. Now, there are a lot of other things that affect the lighting in the room. Let's fill this up with furniture. Furniture has materials sometimes that have a lot of reflective surfaces. As in this case, in a bathroom especially, you have lots of elements like mirrors and shiny surfaces. So let's move the sunlight over here on the other room as if it was the morning light. And we'll light it up. So we have a different type of light here that's bouncing off the floor and the walls towards the side. And if we don't want to see that light in the floor, maybe we can just move the sun a little bit more to the side. I'm going to raise the quality of the render for a more final, a final test. Now that we're approaching at the end of this. The subdivisions here at 100 should give us more detail. There's no change in this area. And we can try now. So generally speaking, here we have good lighting in the room, and this is all indirect light just from using the sunlight. This is what we call realistic, as if that's the way it is. I like this, and I like to check for areas that have good contrast, light, dark areas, smooth surfaces, even lighting, details, the crevices, the edges. So generally speaking, that's what we have to pay attention to in order to make a realistic rendering. Now let me show you some of the materials I have here that reflect light. There is chrome. What else we have? We have stone here. This is polished granite. So generally speaking, all these materials will add light to the room. Now, after you render, if you open your elements list here and you click on any of them, it will help you understand what's going on with your image. And generally, what you see here is noise. If there's noise, you can correct that. We'll talk about this on the next tutorial. Here's all the reflective area. And here's shadows, and help you understand the way how pixels work on your image. And of course, I didn't do this area now. We may have to make a change now. Let's move the light over here, the sunlight, as previously. Let me put this farther late in the day on the other side of the rooms, and we'll render to see what happens. So, as we expect, the room needs more light in this case. Although naturally speaking, this is what it looks like at that time of the day when the lights are not on in the room. What I call it realistic. We won't need this map. We'll turn it off. And so we actually need to turn on the lights in the room. I don't have any light bulbs yet, so I'm going to add 3 lights to my light fixture. I'm going to add Vray lights, the sphere type. Maybe the light bulb should measure 2 to 2.5 inches in size. And if you copy these, you could use this for a common light bulb, these parameters. So I already have my, light fixture with sockets and everything. And I'm going to make 3 lights up here. So hold on. Okay, now let's render. And there we go. That's a realistic look based on these lights, based on our camera settings. Now let's make some adjustments for a good photograph. Maybe if I open my eyes, or, let's open the lens of the camera and maybe change the timing a little bit. We're going to test this in this corner here. And of course we get way too much light near the light bulb. It's almost burning, but not enough light on the floor. If I open my lens just to help on the floor, then I'm going to make it even worse on the top. So let's add a light here, as if there was a light above the shower area. Again, I'm using these parameters. And now we have twice as much light. We have light in this area at the bottom here, and too much light in this area here. So now we can change our camera settings, and we get a better light on the top, and we have good light at the bottom. And that's how you can compromise. We check this area here, and this other one here, and it looks pretty good. So now, I guess we can say that we have a kind of all-around realistic image. For a final render, we will add more sampling, and we will make the scene much larger, and we will give it more time to render. Raising the subdivisions here will help with a much more smooth and fine image in the end. So depending on your graphics card, I suppose, and the speed of your computer, you can imagine it'll take a little bit longer, but it will be worth it. So I'm going to render this at 2000 by 2800 pixels. and then we will see, we'll get an idea what this whole room looks like. And there you have it. So the idea of doing a realistic render with this technique, in my opinion, is much better because, in fact, some of my friends or family, sometimes they see the images, and then they think, and they ask me if I am remodeling my bathroom or I'm painting or adding a door or something. And they say, is that your bathroom? Did you just change something? You know, they sometimes don't realize that this may be a drawing. So I have to say, well, this is not the real thing yet. So adding some good detail and common sense with your lighting will help you create very good realistic renders.